Welcome to Healthy and Wealthy Conversations, where we discuss everything that leads to health and wellness for your whole spirit, soul, mind, and body. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Healthy and Wealthy Conversations. I am your host, Casey Bell, and today's guest is Tim Eggebraaten. Let's get this show started. Tim transitioned from being a police chief to becoming a messenger of optimism. I asked him if he can share what inspired this shift and how his experiences in law enforcement influenced his journey.
It all started with my parents, of course. They instilled in me a positive attitude, and one of my mom's mottos was always, I am, I can, I will. And so I embraced that. And when I got into law enforcement, it was challenged a lot because people don't call 911 to say that their son or daughter just got an A on their report card, and it was a challenging career and a lot of helping people. And I learned early on in my career that I had better start checking myself, make sure my attitude was good, and so I could help other people. And then as my career progressed, then I became in leadership within the department, and it became important to instill that into my officers that we're dealing with tragic things some days and toxic things some days, but there's beauty out there. There's beauty everywhere. And so when I retired about 7 years ago, I began. Right before I retired, I was asked by a pretty big police department if I would share my leadership journey with their leadership team, and I did, and it was profound, and we laughed and cried, and I'm a musician also, so we sang some songs, and it was powerful, and I discovered then that by sharing that message with other people and helping them wherever they're at with their journey. That was part of my mission, and I knew in kindergarten that I was going to be a police officer. It was a calling for me, and right before I retired, I found my second calling of sharing this positive message, and then that morphed into a book, and so it just keeps morphing every single day, and it's around every corner. There's something new and exciting, and I love every piece of it.
In Tim Eggebraaten's book, Find Your Beat, he talks about finding beauty amidst chaos. I asked him if he could share a specific story from a time as a police chief that highlights its theme and how it shaped his perspective.
About 10 months after becoming police chief, we have a pretty small agency. At that time, we had 14 police officers, and one of my best friends and partners of 19 years, about 10 months into my police chief tenure, he died by suicide, and so it really rocked my world. And having, I played the what if game. Should I have seen something? Did we miss something? And so that his death really made me turn everything around and reflect on myself, my career. Um, where was I going? Well, how was I handling trauma throughout my life and my career? And so it really, that event, his death, just really turned me on my head basically, and made me recognize that I'd better step up my game here to take care of myself so I could take care of other people. Up until that point, I was horrible at handling trauma and challenges in life, and I drank a lot, and I kept everything bottled up, and so his death was kind of a catalyst for me to really start looking into myself and saying, what am I doing here, and how am I handling my own wellness and my own mental health. And I discovered pretty quickly that I was horrible at it and I was not doing well with it. And so I got some help. And that was, throughout my life, that was a big part of life, and succeeding in things is recognizing the pieces of my life that I'm good at, and the talents that I've been given, but then also recognizing where I need help. And so my mental health was definitely a piece that I needed help with. And then when I started speaking, I got coaches, and when I started writing, my first stories that I wrote read like a police report. They were horrible, and so I got help in that aspect too. And I think that's important for all of us to recognize what we're good at, but also recognize that we can get into relationships that will help us and kind of fill in those gaps that we may be lacking.
So piggybacking off of that, what have you, if what have you learned yourself in far dealing with those who you're aware may be dealing with suicide, and do you consider it to be a national requirement for police to take some type of a training on how to deal with those who you can clearly see might be suicidal?
Yeah, it's really hard to protect somebody from themselves, and so it's we may see the symptoms. A lot of times we don't, and maybe there's something, and we can always look at it if they try to harm themselves, or if they are successful in harming themselves, then it's really easy. We could look back with that lens and say, oh, well, I noticed that 2 weeks ago this person said something to me or whatever. But at the time, it's really hard. So I don't know that I do know that law enforcement in the state of Minnesota, for sure, that's where I'm at. We do train and try to be aware for helping other people. But one thing law enforcement and the military and first responders are getting better at is recognizing that not only are we supposed to be helping other people, but let's not forget about ourselves too, that when we experience something that is messed up and horrifying, to acknowledge that, and say, wow, that was horrible. And how are we going to deal with that ourselves? And so I think we're getting better at it. But we still have a long way to go. When I started in the late 80s in law enforcement, it was the idea was suck it up, buttercup. What'd you expect? And just dust it off and get back out there. And certainly that's not the way to handle any kind of personal challenges, just to sweep it under the rug. I mean, we have to deal with them. And that's what I started talking about. And that's, part of what my book was that tactics, for people to apply to their lives that are simple. They're not easy to apply, but they're simple in nature. And so I think as far as training goes, I think the biggest part of it is just demystifying that stigma that, if I ask somebody for help, then they're going to look at me like I'm broken, or maybe I shouldn't be doing the job that I'm doing, whatever it is, whatever that job is. And so I think when we can start acknowledging uh, that there's post-traumatic stress disorder, but there's also post-traumatic growth, where we handle that traumatic incident or situation, whether it's child abuse, as we're growing up, or something somebody does to us as in our teens, or whatever it is, whatever that trauma is, we can also recognize that there's growth that comes out of that, and it's uh, everybody has something going on in their life, and so how do we navigate that, and that's the trick, isn't it? Is that uh, there are people out there that will help. Some of it's free in the form of going to the library and getting a book on wellness or mental health, and it's absolutely free. Some of it's available online that's free. Some of it's low cost, like counseling, that's like a group counseling type setting, and there's all kinds of different uh, avenues that we can get help. And but the first stop is to recognize that we probably do need some help, and so that's the first step. And then after that, then determining what's going to work for us. And but that's what I love about like the book world. And I'm not a big social media person anymore. I used to be, but there are some good things in social media that are out there and that are helpful, and if you can weed it out. But then you have to start applying those to your own life. You just can't read it and then just sit back and have a sandwich. I mean, you have to like plug it in and apply it to your life and get after it too.
Music plays a significant role in Tim's book. I asked him how has music personally helped him through tough times, and what advice would he give to others about incorporating music into their own healing process.
I think we incorporate music into our daily lives automatically. For In our DNA, I believe that there's rhythm, and I mean even way back in history, when we would communicate by music and by drums, and so I think that's somehow wired in us, music, and we can listen to a song, whatever the genre is that we like. And if we hear a song and if we link that to a positive emotion, our first date, or we meet somebody, or something positive happens or something negative happens, and a song comes on the radio, it gets like meshed in and hardwired into our brains. And so music for me, I was whistling before I could talk, and I always have a song in my head, like constantly, and it's not a bad thing. I love it. I love having music in my head. And um, in my book, I talk about a friend of mine that had dementia, and I went to visit him, and my other friend said, he's not going to recognize you. I was like, well, maybe not, but I'm still going to go just to visit him. And I brought my guitar with me, and they were right. My friends were right. He didn't recognize me at all, and he couldn't hardly communicate. He was just talking in gibberish, and I didn't understand anything he was saying. And so I put my guitar case up on the table, and as clear as a bell, he said, "You've been doing this a long time, haven't you, Tim?" And his eyes got clear, and I looked at him, and just as quickly as he lit up, uh, that quick, the light got distinguished again, or extinguished again, and he went back to talking gibberish. But then I was playing um, Margaritaville by Jimmy Buffett, and he lit up again, and he kind of started mouthing some of the words. And so that's where I think music hits us. And I use music in my presentation when I'm speaking, doing my keynote presentation. Um, I'll use like 3 songs throughout the presentation just to make it memorable, make it stick. And so and some of it's original music, so they've never heard it before. They'll likely never hear it again. But there's just something about when you're sharing a story and you're sharing a concept with somebody, if you can if you can wire in music, whether it's yourself, playing guitar, or a recording of a song or something that's playing in the background. I think that's what really ties it in. When we're children and we're learning the ABCs, we sing it. We sing the ABCs, and that because it sticks with us. And so I don't claim to know how music is wired into us, but I just do know that when I play for a lot of senior citizens, and I'm a hospice volunteer, and I'll be playing for people near or at the end of their life, and just seeing the reaction. I don't get a reaction every time, but just a lot of the times I get some kind of a reaction from them, that I'm knowing that the rhythm or the music or the something's getting through to them, and it's bringing them back to hopefully a happier time in their life.
Tim Eggebraaten mentions personal struggles in his book. I asked him what was one of the most challenging moments he faced and how did he use positivity and resilience to overcome the challenges.
Um, so alcohol was a huge factor in my life, beginning when I was 12 years old until I was 51 years old. And so I used alcohol, and I didn't understand it at the time. I just did it. That was another positive side effect of writing a book. So I encourage your listeners, if you're thinking about writing, just start by journaling. And there's something healing in that when you start journaling about your life or stories or whatever it is. But uh, when I started writing, it became more clear to me why at 12 years old I started drinking. And for me, it was I was very insecure and where I didn't feel like I fit in. And but on the outside, people thought, well, I was very loud and boisterous, and like I fit in everywhere. I was a social chameleon. I'd fit into all different groups, and but for me, I was scared to death. And at 12 years old, I found alcohol, and when I was drinking with people, then it like leveled the playing field where I was one of them, and I was an equal to them. And then when I got into law enforcement, then it was the same thing. It was at every stage of my career, I felt like I didn't belong there. When I was a sergeant, I thought, who am I? I mean, who am I to be a sergeant? And I'd hang out with other sergeants, and I'd feel inadequate again. But then the alcohol would level the playing field, and dealing with traumatic situations, just apply more alcohol. And then so that was just a theme through my whole adult life mostly. And I got arrested about a year after I retired from law enforcement, and for driving under the influence. And that was a huge wake up call for me, and made me, really look at it. And I had had several uh, warnings before that, like in just arguments with my wife, or, just different parts. I always call them puzzle pieces in my life. I didn't recognize the full picture when these puzzle pieces were getting put in. But then when I got arrested, that was a big puzzle piece that it's like, hey, dude, you need to change a lot here. And it's got to start with getting rid of the booze. And I was thankful that I didn't have a physical addiction. So it wasn't like when I quit that I went through withdrawals or anything like that. So I was thankful for that. It was just, figuring out why I was doing it in the first place. And then, um, by when I eliminate that, and I've been doing one man band entertainment for 25 years, and I thought that was a part of it, drinking with my people that I was playing for. I thought that was just part of the gig, and the reality was that was all self-induced. Had nothing to do with the gig. And so once I removed alcohol, and my playing became better, my shows became 100 times better, and I recognized that my audience didn't care if I was drinking or not, and it was just all self-imposed. And but again, that was another healing part of the writing process, that helped me kind of unravel 50 plus years of life, and like, okay, well, what does make Tim Eggebraaten tick? And it was very, very healing. And I had heard that from other authors that had said that, and but to experience that firsthand was amazing. And then now hearing from people like around the world that have read my book and getting messages, it's like humbling and mind blowing at the same time. Like that's something I can say or write or sing that has a positive impact on somebody, and that's my calling now. It's my purpose. It's what else is there?
Tim discussed the concept of realistic optimism and how people can apply it to their daily life.
I think realistic optimism is not that everything is sunshine and lollipops, because it's not. We're all going to have challenges in life, and I think that realistic optimism is, even if you just look at yourself today, that hey, you made it to today, whether you're 8 years old or 88 years old. I mean, you made it to today, and so all the challenges that you faced, that you thought throughout your life when you were facing those challenges, and you thought this is it. It can't get any worse. Whatever those challenges were, you made it. And so I think that realistic optimism, sometimes when I'm talking about optimism and positivity, people will say, well, I'm a realist, and okay, and I say, well, what does that mean? I mean, I'm a realist too. And to me, the reality is that, like, I can look at the weather, for example, and if it's raining, I can look at that and say, you know what, we must have needed the rain, or I'm not going to look at it and whine about it. And so that's where I go with realistic optimism. That whole idea that uh, whatever the challenges that we're facing today, first of all, I'm thankful for the challenges. I believe that events happen for us and not to us. I'm not a victim of anything. I am. I honestly look at life that way. And so when sickness comes in, or when COVID happened, or whatever happens, I really try to look at that as a learning opportunity, and how can I grow from this, and where are we going to go from here, and so that's what I believe is realistic optimism.
For those of you who may be feeling overwhelmed by negativity or life challenges, Tim discusses practical steps that you can start today for finding your rhythm and embracing the sympathy of gratitude.
Well, you nailed it right there. Gratitude. So one of the tactics that I talk to people about is to think of somebody that has inspired them, like a coach or a teacher, a mentor, a parent, and and if they wrote that person an old school pen and paper letter telling them that they inspire them, and why they inspire them, and how that makes them feel, and then actually sending the letter. And so that's releasing chemicals within us. And the people that study these activities, they compare the effects of these letter writings, these gratitude letters. Um, the effects are compared to the effects of Prozac, and they're powerful. And so that's one thing I would say, is to write a letter of gratitude to somebody, and then following up with that is to keep a gratitude journal, 3 to 5 parts of your day that you're thankful for. And so before you go to bed, you write down 3 to 5 parts of your day, why you're thankful for them, how that makes you feel. There's apps, free apps on your phone that you can download, and helps you track them. It'll give you reminders. But by doing that and focusing on what you're thankful for, it helps get you out of that cycle of just beating your chest and saying, poor me, poor lowly me. And the third thing I would recommend for people is to filter the negative. And whether that's coming into your life through social media, or the music you're listening to, if it's just angry, hostile music that you're listening to all the time. And I'm not saying that's bad to listen to that, because sometimes you just feel so frustrated that listening to your favorite just rage song feels kind of good to let it off. But when you filter some of that static that you're getting into your life, and maybe it's the people you're hanging out with that's causing that static, and when you start to filter that, when you honestly evaluate where you're getting your information from, how much you're getting, are you watching the news, 8 hours a day, and or what you consider the news? Are you dialing into the comments on social media so much that every time you do, you get just disgusted, and you yell at the screen, and you're yelling at the person that will never hear you? You probably don't even know the person. So those three things I think are huge. Um, and then, like, that over developing, or that umbrella of positive music. I mean, There's so much positive out there. And you can take a song, and depending on what kind of mood you're in, the same song can mean a totally different thing in a different setting or a different season of your life. And so but it's powerful, and it all comes down to us. I mean, yourself to do that for yourself. If you're relying on other people to boost you up, it's not going to happen. And if you're relying on external circumstances that are going to happen, it's probably not going to happen. So it all boils down to, how are we doing it? How are we showing up? What's coming out of our mouth? What's coming out of our keyboard? And so not only are we filtering the stuff that's coming in, we're filtering what's going out too. That we're checking ourselves and being realistic about all of that.
So that is all we have for you today on Healthy and Wealthy Conversations. Tim joins me tomorrow, continuing this discussion on Ready Writer. He discusses his publishing journey and some advice he has for authors. Again, join us tomorrow on Ready Writer, where I will continue this conversation with Tim Eggebraaten. Thank you for watching.